I believe it was 1453 that Thutmoses III begins his campaign. What had the Egyptians learned from the Hyksos? They learned about the fast-wheeled, two-wheeled chariot, war chariot, which they copied. They also copied the composite bow, which had been brought in by the conquerors. They now had the most advanced weaponry, and they had this aggressive and inspired desire to impose their will upon the world. And in 1453, he leaves Egypt, crosses the Sinai Desert, and begins his conquest of Western Asia. He conquered Western Asia from Egypt up to the Euphrates River. And that means he conquered what is, Palestine, Jordan, half of Syria, all of Lebanon, the wide swath from Egypt up to the Euphrates River. He made an interesting observation when he saw the Euphrates River. He said, in this part of the world, the rivers flow uphill, which is not true. But you see, in Egypt, the Nile flows from south to north. And here he encountered the first great river, which flows from north to south. So he misinterpreted. But in any event, in order to show, well, I've conquered everything, he had a statue made with a big inscription, a long inscription, and had it put on the other bank of the Euphrates, that is, on the east bank, as if to say, not only have I conquered Asia up to the great river, I've even conquered the river itself. And then, of course, now he was pharaoh of a great empire. Now, this empire of Thutmoses III, this became the Egyptian empire, which in official terms, in the eyes of the Egyptians, it lasted from 1453, from the time of his conquest, until well into the 13th century, about even 1225. I'm saying that because officially the Egyptians claimed that they were the rulers. In actual fact, as we will see, they did lose control over it for a considerable period of time, but they still boasted that they were the rulers of these areas. And later on in the reign of Ramses II, when he tried to reestablish Egyptian control over Western Asia, it was not so successful, but he tried to. He still claimed that he was ruler of all of Western Asia. And his successor, Merneptah, in 1225, actually erects a stela, a big stone. The Latin word stela it's usually a stone, flat, that might be 5 or 6 inches thick, and it might be, it might be anything from 3 feet to 6 feet tall. It's covered with inscriptions and sometimes a sculpture. Pharaoh Merneptah in 1225 BC erected a stela, which is called the Victory Stela. Why? Because he claims victory. And when you read that, you realize he says a lot of things which we know were not so. I mean, he makes claims which are not so. But nevertheless, he always claims victory, just as Ramses II claimed victory. We'll talk about his so-called victory. So now Egypt was in control of this empire. Now, what was the result of these developments? First of all, Hatshepsut's expansion of Egyptian economic power, and then Thutmoses' conquest of all of the areas of Western Asia. And you have Egyptians living in Byblos, which is in northern Canaan, and probably in many other places where the Egyptians were doing business with the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Babylonians. There were commercial operations going on, commercial transactions going on, and agents went out to conduct these commercial transactions. And eventually, a group of Egyptians became a class of wealthy people. But they had a very interesting problem. You know, in any society, if you have a certain structure which lasts for a long time, of course people want to keep it, those who have a vested interest in that structure. Egyptian society from ancient times had always consisted of an aristocracy, the royal family, the aristocracy, a priesthood, and all the rest of the people were just people who lived on the land and worked it. So you had peasants. So you have aristocracy and peasantry. What about us, middle class, merchants, bourgeois? There was no such thing in Egypt in ancient times. Now, as a result of these developments, the economic expansion and the military expansion, there is a class of Egyptians who have emerged who have money, but they have no status. They have money, but there is no place in that pyramid where they could stick themselves in as a power source. As a result of this, eventually, a revolution breaks out in Egypt.